Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Coming up on this week's show, Saudi Arabia plans to execute a woman activist. Israa al-Ghomgham has spent nearly 3 years in jail for her advocacy of greater rights for the country's Shiite minority. Israel, a nation divided over the military drafting of ultra-Orthodox Jews. The country now awaits a bill that could unravel the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. Also coming up, painting the horrors of Syria's detention centres, we bring you a report on Najah Albukai, who travels across France today to raise awareness about torture. All those stories coming up, but first to Saudi Arabia, where rights groups are warning that a female activist may be beheaded along with several other activists. Israa al-Ghomgham and her husband were jailed for helping to organise anti-government protests in the rest of Eastern Province. She will be tried in the kingdom's counter-terror court in Riyadh later in October. Selina Sykes has the story.
Campaigning to save her life, Israa al-Ghomgham's supporters are spreading this photo of her as a child on social media. Together with 4 other human rights activists, she risks execution by beheading, a sentence sought by Saudi Arabian prosecutors. The 29-year-old is accused of participating in Shiite protests and chanting slogans hostile to the government during the Arab Spring. She was arrested with her husband at their home in December 2015. They have been in prison ever since. NGOs are concerned her fate could set a precedent for other female activists.
This is simply atrocious and appalling because what they've been accused of obviously are not recognizable crimes, nor does it meet international standards. What we're seeing now is a complete silence from European governments, from governments that have traditionally spoken out against the death penalty and promoted women's rights.
If the sentence is confirmed, she would become the first female activist in Saudi Arabia to be executed for expressing a political opinion. Mohammed bin Salman's social and economic reforms have unfolded against a backdrop of increasing arrests of activists, including several women. According to some experts, the Crown Prince's crackdown casts a shadow on his efforts to promote himself as a modernising reformer.
When he sees activists who spark protests with people chanting anti-Saudi slogans, that poses a problem for the Saudi authorities. What the authorities can't stand the most is that the activists are supported by Iran.
Since the prince's succession, the number of executions in Saudi Arabia has increased rapidly to an average of 5 a week. Israa al-Ghomgham and the 4 other activists are due in court on the 28th of October.
Moving on, according to a report issued by the United Nations, parties fighting in Yemen may have been responsible for war crimes. They include the government of Yemen, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Houthi rebels. They've also urged the international community to refrain from providing arms that could be used in the conflict. In other regional news, the war of words between Iran and the United States continues. Tehran has accused Washington of naked economic aggression, urging a top court at The Hague to lift what it calls unjust sanctions. The US, for its part, has vowed to fight the claims, saying they are meritless. Here's Catherine Viette with the latest.
Iran is pleading its case before the International Court of Justice. The Islamic Republic is seeking to have the sanctions reimposed by the U.S. lifted. Tehran says the move is nothing but naked economic aggression and violates a 1955 bilateral agreement known as the Treaty of Amity.
The United States is publicly propagating a policy intended to damage, as severely as possible, Iran's economy and Iranians' nationals and companies.
In May, Washington pulled out of the landmark 2015 nuclear agreement and promised to reinstate the sanctions that had been lifted as part of the deal. The fallout has already hit the Iranian economy hard. Many multinationals have started to wind down their operations there. The Iranian currency has lost 2/3 of its value over the past 6 months. The country's famous hand-woven rugs are back on the sanctions list, And now carpet sellers are worried about making ends meet.
In the past 2 years, America has been the best market for us, in my opinion, the best market in history. 90% of Iran's rug exports were sent to the U.S.
Washington is arguing the ICJ has no jurisdiction in this case, but says it's ready to vigorously defend itself against what it says are Iran's meritless claims. While rulings by the World Court are legally binding, it lacks the power to enforce them.
The role of Israel's ultra-Orthodox Jews in society has often been a subject of debate, particularly given their exemption from military service. Now, that could be about to change with a bill that could see students of religion brought into line with the rest of the population. It went through Parliament on its first reading in July, though it could have major consequences for the Israeli government. The heads of Orthodox parties have been threatening to quit the nation's ruling coalition if the bill does in fact become law. Luke Schrager reports.
In West Jerusalem's Meir She'arim neighborhood, residents are preparing for the Sabbath. Roads are closed to prevent people from driving in an area home only to ultra-Orthodox Jews. Called the Haredim, the Torah scriptures dictate their way of life. However, a bill that could see them conscripted for national service has sparked shock in the community.
The ultra-Orthodox today are 1 million people. They believe that studying the Torah is the most important thing for the Jewish nation, not wars, not the army. The army isn't an appropriate place for a religious man. Recruiting changes the culture and values, feelings. For moral reasons, it doesn't fit.
Israeli law says every man and woman over 18 must serve in the army. While Orthodox Jews can apply for an exemption, they may not be able to for much longer. A first reading of a bill in the Knesset designed to boost numbers in the military passed in July, saying certain numbers of Haredim would have to perform national service too, under threat of financial penalties. Failure to meet set quotas for service over 3 years would lead to the law's withdrawal and replacement with a blanket conscription policy. It led to outrage from Orthodox quarters and threats that conservative parties would pull out of the ruling government coalition. One left-wing party had other reservations.
Our position for many years is to look for equality. The ultra-Orthodox community is very poor and marginalised and does not have the same opportunities in the workplace as the majority. This law is a big Israeli lie. It contributes nothing and doesn't help the ultra-Orthodox community.
As ultra-Orthodox protests multiplied, so too did violence and clashes with police, particularly after the detention of a Haredi student who'd refused to show up at a military recruitment centre. Even with the possibility they have to obtain an exemption, many in the community refuse to do so on religious grounds and are seen as draft dodgers.
There's strong resistance from ultra-Orthodox society towards going into the army, except for young modern liberals who are starting to, but the mainstream stay to study the Torah in seminaries.
Over 10 years, numbers of Haredi youths enlisting have gone from 300 to 3,000. However, they can in turn face aggression and harassment on their return home.
We end with the story of one man whose memories of war have become his art. This as they continue to haunt him. Najah Albukai was twice held in Syria's notorious detention centres. Today he spends his time travelling across France to raise awareness of the impact of conflict.
Haunting memories that have been etched into his mind. Syrian artist Najah Albukai says this sketch is of the flying carpet, a torture technique where a prisoner is folded in half, and that this is known as the German chair.
You place the chair right here, under the arms, and then you push on the back of the chair so that it lifts up and makes the prisoner's body become completely curved.
Albukai joined pro-revolution protests early on and was sent to Centre 227 twice. In total, he spent around 11 months in a 5-by-3-metre cell with 70 other people. In 2014, his wife put together 18,000 euros in bribes to get him released, but not before Albukai saw countless inmates die from torture and disease.
We're suspended between life and death. They're apocalyptic periods. You feel like you're in a nightmare.
Despite his experiences, Albukai says he's determined to bear witness to the horrors of the Syrian regime.
Drawing is a way of not giving in, of not giving up.
Amnesty International estimates that from 2011 to 2015, almost 18,000 people died in custody in Syria.
That's it for us this week. Don't forget you can contact us by visiting our Facebook page. That's Middle East Matters France 24, or you can drop us a tweet. Thank you for watching.